Hi, and welcome to Unstuck Club, episode 4. We are just so excited. Thank you for joining myself, Jodene, and Di. The feedback has been amazing, and we have had people who are really invested and sent us voice notes and messages and shared it along. So we are really, truly grateful. How are you, Di?
Yeah, I'm good. And yeah, to add to that, I'm so touched by the number of people that have contacted me and said how much they appreciated my vulnerability in sharing my journey and going to see a psychologist, which I'm still with the psychologist. I've had a couple of sessions now, and it's really eye-opening to see just how much stuff we actually sit on without even realizing it. But there was one thing that stuck in my mind from my session this week. And she said to me, just remember, that is not who you are now. You're not that 4-year-old or that 7-year-old or that 12-year-old. Yes, you are holding the memory, but that's not who you are now. And funnily enough, Joe, looking at the work that you do, one of the things I have to do this week is write down all the things I have achieved in my life, because now we're going to kind of flip it. Now we've unpacked all the really sort of the dark stuff. Now it's in perfect alignment with your self-worth list. In fact, I'm actually going to take it with me next week when I go and see you. But that, she said, that's not who you are now. And I think that was like a big aha for me. Like, no, it's not who I am. And I don't have to keep allowing those things to keep pulling me back. But I was really touched by just the beautiful messages from people just saying, like, thank you for sharing, and I so relate, and thank you for being so brave. So yeah, can't believe it's episode 4.
I know. You know, Di, on that note, uh, it's amazing how powerful the ego is, right? The ego voices are, because that rational mind that we talk about, the rational mind of being in the present moment and understanding who you are and acting in faith and in bravery, we dip in and out of that, and it takes us so much work and effort to dip in and out of that. But when we are in that irrational mind, which is so autopilot for us, like just slipping into that unconscious, to tell the rational mind, you are not that 6-year-old, you're not that 4-year-old, you're not that teenager, you're not that abandoned child, you're not that wounded person, it makes so much sense. But the hold that ego has on you, and just keeps on taking you back, like energetically, and in that unconscious irrational space, in your unconscious responses, that's the work. The very work is to have to remind yourself so gently that you aren't that 4-year-old. And it's interesting, I love that you're going to take your self-worth list with, because very often I have people say to me, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go and see this person, and then I'll come back to you. And I understand sometimes it's financially, but also you and I are really good at making sure that we fit in financially with people. I don't know if everybody knows that even through Lifeology, we literally have a pay what you feel, right? To make sure that you can do both, so that it doesn't have to be that either or, because when everyone comes together and we all support you in different ways, you get this holistic approach to this really brave journey that you've gone on.
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled to hear that. I'm really, really thrilled to hear that. So this is what we're going to be chatting about today. I had a very interesting, but a very dear friend. We voice note each other for ages, and she speaks poetically and she writes poetically. And she asked me a beautiful question. She asked me where my values sit, where my values are aligned with confrontation. Because, did you get that?
Yeah, I got that. I mean, that's such a big
The way that you
question.
said that, must I repeat it? It actually is that big. It actually is that big.
Yeah.
And I wrote down, I said to her while I was voice noting, I said, I'm actually writing down because this is definitely going to be our Thursday topic, because I'm actually going to hand over to you because you said it so beautifully when we decided we were going to talk about this. Like, actually how important it is to say what you need to say, right?
Yeah, I think, when we did the last episode, I really got that, like, if we're going to develop a series of like points of how to get unstuck, I think the biggest is acknowledging how you feel first, and then being able to speak out about it. And I think that so many of us get stuck in that, and possibly because of childhood. You, as a child, you basically had to go along with what your parents said. I mean, I'm talking about my generation. The kids coming through now, I think it's a little bit different, but certainly when I was growing up, it was like, this was the model of a happy family, and you didn't deviate from that model. And you went to school and you got educated, and then you went to college or university, or you got a job, and then you got married, and so it went. And I think in that process there was so much of us that was suppressed. I know for me, I know there's a creative, fantasy loving, zany side of myself that, yes, she's there, but certainly not to the extent that she was when I was a child. But having very sort of middle of the road conservative parents, that kind of thing was never encouraged.
Mm.
And I was never brave enough to speak out. And even now, I'm getting a lot braver. As I become unstuck, I'm getting a lot braver. But I think it is one of the core foundational issues of being stuck is not speaking out and not wanting to confront. And you don't have to confront. You don't have to be aggressive. But I think if you want to get unstuck, you have to be assertive. And the problem is, of course, we don't like what we think is going to happen when we
Yes.
speak out.
Yes. And I think now it's such a beautiful time to just go into a little bit of that science and understanding of the mind, because there's a really good reason why we don't speak out, right? So when we go back to the filing cabinet that we've been speaking about, and we've got these memories the whole time. These memories of the victim and the child. So at some point in your life being victimized, some point in your life being made to feel like the child, abandoned, vulnerable, lost, alone. We're made up of consistent chattering of voices within our head, not psychological voices. It's the thoughts. Our thoughts are continuously speaking to us. It's the best way to say it. And we have the ego mind, and then we have four really powerful, what we have gathered together and called the custodians, almost like the bodyguards of choices and decisions, right? And just as you're about to do something, one of these custodians is going to speak up within the mind, and it's always in this protective space the whole time. So this is what we will always be afraid of when we want to be ourselves and we want to brave speaking up, and then we're concerned at some point of one of the following things happening. I'm going to do this, and then there's going to be a lack of worthiness. So the response is actually going to knock my self-worth, right? I'm not brave enough to actually say what needs to be said, and I'm not brave enough to manage whatever's going to come back to me. So if I have the courage to say it, I'm not going to have the courage to deal with whatever hits me from the other person, okay? I do not trust the person, myself, the environment. I don't trust that it will be a safe enough space for me to say what I need to say. And the last one is it might bring about change. I could say this and the relationship might not last. The dynamic will never be the same again. We will never go back to who we are. So, as someone is about to brave saying something, one of these voices is going to chirp because there's going to be a trigger. There's going to be some kind of a trigger of an absolute insecurity that speaking our truth, first of all, it doesn't have to go to confrontation. That's exactly what you say.
Yeah.
That speaking our truth is going to bring about something that we do not believe we have the capacity to manage.
Yeah.
So we rather just keep quiet and don't say anything.
And I think it's that thing of it's being in the comfort zone. But your comfort zone ends up being a prison. It's a comfortable prison, but it's still a prison. And it is, you get these niggly little sort of soul nudges.
Yes.
But you keep pushing them down. Or like it'll come up and then one of the custodians will come in and go, but if you do that, you could be homeless, or he won't love you, or she won't love you, or you'll lose this, or you'll have to sacrifice that. But the thing is, you don't get any growth in the comfort zone. And beyond the comfort, that first comfort zone, there is the fear zone. It's absolutely, I'm not denying that the day you make that decision, and very often it's either like you've just run out of rope. You are the end. There is the end of the rope. You have no more rope, or it's anger, and it's like there is a trigger. There's something in you, and you go, "I'm done. I have to change this." And then you go into the fear, which is that fear zone is where that's like the custodian's feeding ground. They just love that area, and then they start throwing these things at you. So it does take great courage, but we all have that courage. And the weird thing is that when you actually decide to make the decision, very often, yes, there may be things that change drastically, but it's incredible how supported you can be. And like all of a sudden, all things just happen and people show up and you're like, wasn't as bad as I thought it would be.
It's taken me a long time, and I don't want to sound like I'm so absolutely confident that I get it right all the time. But I do have the two opposite ends of the scale, which I want to share, because there is something within me, within my values, right, that it is very important for me to speak my truth at the risk of whatever. And I have an example of a relationship that did not survive, and I have an example of a relationship that truly, truly blossomed. And so years ago, I had a friendship of well over 20 years. We were absolutely inseparable. And we also had a business together. And somewhere along the line, in just connecting with other people, a third person came into the mix. And this third person was having a look at this friendship dynamic that I had, this long standing friendship dynamic. And this third person started to whisper into this friend's ear and was saying things like, Jodene dominates the partnership and she does whatever she wants to do, and you're stuck there, and she's got the freedom. Absolutely not understanding the agreement that we had within the business, not understanding the years of friendship and the support that we actually had for each other. And this friend wasn't brave enough, this is in my perception, wasn't brave enough to really hold on to whatever her own truth was. And then I wanted to confront the situation. So I went to her. I said to her, we really need to talk. We've got a long friendship and we have a business together. And I went to her, and the door was opened not by her, by this other person. And I said, I wanted this friend. I wanted this conversation just between the two of us. And yeah, this other person was like, no, you bully her and you override her, and nothing, you will not have a conversation without her. So I turned to this friend of mine of all these years and I was like, surely we can have a conversation, you and I, just together and hash it out. And this other person just spoke on her behalf. She wasn't even brave enough to use her words. And it was really, really traumatic and heartbreaking for me um, because I was so ready to speak my truth, and it wasn't a terrible truth. It wasn't, but it was. It is. These are my values. This is how we said we run the business. It was fine for so many years, and I want to know what's changed. Like I want to know what's changed, and we then had to go through this process of winding that business down, and that friendship. The friendship didn't survive 2 decades of friendship, and we needed to wind it down. And it's so important that people know that story, because the business partnership that I have now, when things are crumbling and falling apart, you just, there's this, and it's another thing that the ego does. And whenever I speak about the ego, it's always with such empathy, because it's just looking into the past and holding on to making sure that you never repeat a pattern that's going to hurt you or wound you. And looking forward, I was like, who am I going to be? What am I going to become? Like, this business partnership was everything. This friendship was everything. And the business partnership that I have now, the business I have now, the career I have now, I can't tell you what it's like. So the release of something that didn't serve me wasn't such a bad thing. And my other one, where so much strength has come out of it, is in my family dynamic with my oldest sister. We really didn't get on when we were younger, and we struggled. And as we got older and older, we struggled, and we learned that we needed each other at some point along the way. However, there was so much water under the bridge, and it was so hectic. And sometimes we would get together and we'd end up screaming and shouting at each other, and it was awful. And COVID was amazing because we got locked down together, and we needed to start to have these conversations. There were kids in the house. We couldn't be yelling at each other and making it seem like the family was going to fall apart. And I cannot tell you, I mean, my oldest sister now is my best friend, because we started to tell each other the perception of each other. We started to tell each other what the one did that hurt the other one. We started to tell each other what the one does that is so frustrating, so annoying, so upsetting. She was like, all you want to do is walk out the room. And I was like, because all that you want to do is tell me what to do. And we've learned so much along the way, and we catch each other now. We literally catch each other in mid repeated pattern. But it's a risk. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It's a risk to brave holding your values enough to say to yourself, I care enough for myself to express what needs to be said. As tough as it is.
That's so important. I mean, I know, one of my really good friends calls them honest friend moments. And she'll look at me and say, we need to have an honest friend moment. And the hardest conversations that I've ever had have been with two of my closest friends and my husband. And I believe that the strength of our marriage was because we could sit down and have those hard conversations and say, like, I'm not happy with the way things are, or, I'm unhappy with whatever it is that you're doing. And it's not easy to sit and listen to how someone else is perceiving you. And I think that word perception is so important.
Yeah.
People will see you from their perception of the world. They will see your actions. You can do something with the best intentions in the world from your perception. it can be received so differently. And that's
Completely.
what we need to remember. And so those honest friend moments, for me, they have really, I have such deep friendships with two particular women that we can now talk about anything that's going on between us. And it has been very, very uncomfortable at times, but the friendship has come out stronger
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
end of it.
Yeah.
And I think, you're not, whoever listens to this, you are not going to get unstuck until you really start to be honest with yourself and acknowledge the voices, the custodians that are feeding you this
Yeah.
stuff, and drown out the voice of your soul every time. They will, most of the time, until you really become very conscious and aware of them and how they show up, they will drown out that authentic voice.
Yeah. Naturally, we just want to take the path of least resistance, just naturally.
Yeah.
We don't want to do the tougher things. In the beautiful combined work that you and I do, in the foundational self-awareness work, there's a point within our lives, when we look at the blueprint of who we are, there's a point within our lives called lessons from the past. And each one of us has certain lessons from the past that it's it is wise um, to brave understanding why you resist the repeated lesson, because so many things come up over and over again. And a lot of times it's just because the fear of what will change if I do something different. That's the fear. What will
Yeah.
change if I do something different?
Mm.
And that's where the self-worth is so important. That's where the self-worth is so important.
Yeah.
And I know in the feedback that we got, there was someone who said, you spoke something about a list, uh, and we haven't really been absolutely clear on what the self-worth list is. And
Yeah, no, we haven't.
yeah, in a nutshell, it's a beautiful process of going into the blueprint of who you are through your birth date and finding your unique traits, your core characteristics and your unique traits. And then we do this beautiful process of going through each of the traits and seeing which of those traits were not grabbed hold of by the ego and tucked away. So they actually do create the foundation of your self-worth. So you can say things like, oh, I am actually really logical, or I am compassionate when I communicate. I am I am a leader in the way that I communicate. It all depends on what your archetypes and your core characteristics are. And when you have that, when you have a self-worth list that says I am with each of these traits that you are innately born with, then every time something comes up, you actually have you have the ability to go back into your traits and find the ones that for this moment in time you can actually use for the next brave thing that you're going to do, because that is it's the bottom line. The bottom line is we don't do something different because we do not understand that we have whatever it is in us that's unique to us that will get us through the change that is about to come.
Yeah, and the other beautiful thing about that process that you haven't mentioned is that you ask a couple of people who are close to, who know you.
Yes.
And that's really important because very often you don't see your strengths, and there are also things like people see something. I mean, I remember when we did ours and, the feedback came back and I went, I'm not like that. But other people see me like that. And it's a really, I mean, my family will have my whole life told me I'm bossy. But I'm not bossy. I just get things done. But I'm well aware that I can be impatient and I can be bossy. But I
Yeah.
don't like to hear things like that. I like to hear that, I'm compassionate and I'm empathetic and I'm kind. But I know I'm bossy and I know I'm impatient. So I think because you do that, you really get a solid self-worth list, which includes things that we often, it's fascinating to me that, I remember when I did the self-nurturing weekends for women retreat, and I'd ask them to write down 10 things they loved about themselves. Some of them could not even get 2. If I'd asked them to write 20 things they hated about themselves, they probably would have given me 50. And I just think it is the saddest thing that we only ever focus on our perceived shortcomings. And I watched a video this morning of a woman who was saying she loves watching women when they are no longer aware of how they look. So they're speaking involved in something that gets their full attention. And she used the phrase, she says they're not objectifying themselves. They're not going, oh, how does my hair look? Has my mascara run? Is my turkey neck showing? They are just so in the moment with whatever it is they're doing. And she says for those few moments, you see the true essence of the person. And I think this is the downside of social media. I mean, just to share before Joe and I started recording, both of her and I are sitting here and we're adjusting and we're checking the hair. It's what you do when there's a camera around. So it's just, it's the society we live in. Like, you have to show up in a certain way. And I just thought it was so beautiful that she was, for that moment, the authentic person shows up.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, these custodians can be so damaging, is we just are so hard on ourselves. We just don't believe in ourselves. And, I always go back to, there's nearly 8 billion people on this planet. And there is no one exactly like me or exactly like you or the person listening to this or watching this. They might look like you. They might have similar mannerisms. There's no one with your identical genetic makeup and thoughts and the way you show up. And that blows my mind. That's how unique we are. And yet we spend a great deal of these precious lives trying to be something else, comparing ourselves to someone else. And I think getting unstuck is about claiming your space, however you show up in that. It's just, here I am, and I'm going to do the best that I can with what I have.
Which comes full circle, because in order to really be able to claim your space, you cannot be avoidant of what you need to say in order to claim your space. You cannot be avoidant of the conversations, and things can start so little, and then it builds and it builds and it builds, and then you just have this. It's a relationship that you don't even know whether you can repair. When someone says, "We're doing this," and then the other person says, "Well, okay, I'll tag along," and then it's always, okay, I'm the one who makes the decision. Okay, well, now I'm not actually doing the things that I like, or okay, I'm making the decision. And then the one day, you do get to that point and you blurt something out and you go, I never do what I want to do. And the person goes, but every time I make a suggestion, you never say it's not what I want to do. So a lot of that avoidance comes back to that worthiness of, it's a big question. It's such a big question. And I ask it all the time. What's the worst that can happen? Because that's where the ego goes. The ego goes to the place of what's the worst that can happen. And there's a part of us in the deep subconscious that doesn't think we will survive the worst that can happen, but actually we will. And the worst that can happen most of the time is that the relationship will fall apart. Right?
Yeah.
That is the worst that can happen.
Yeah.
And we need to build on from that, but to not have the courage and the confidence to have a conversation that may or may not result in conflict, when you are actually in this dynamic, you don't feel like you're trusting the person. Maybe that's it. You don't feel like you're being treated like an equal. You don't feel like you're being heard. You feel like you are being mistreated in some way. Any of those things, then you are saying, I am not worthy.
Mm. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. When your
Yeah.
self-esteem and your self-worth is low. I mean, I have such a beautiful example of this years ago when my best friend, who now abandoned me and moved to New Zealand, was living here in Nelspruit with me. And my brother was out from the UK, and we went to a beautiful seafood restaurant in Nelspruit. And when we got there, you couldn't book. And Costa, the owner, said, it's about half an hour wait for a table. We said, no problem. We were sitting there. I think we got drinks. My friend swept in and she looked, and I said, oh, it's about half an hour for the table. And she went, no, no, no. She went to the floor man. She's like, no, that table of two, push them together. Within 5 minutes, we were seated. They were like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. And she's like, I don't wait. That's what she said. I don't wait for tables. And, there's me, if it says don't walk on the grass, I don't walk on the grass. And I will always try and be accommodating. And I've never forgotten that. And she just looked at the three of us and she went, I don't wait for tables.
Which is...
It's so beautiful. And things happened for her. Like, it was in a strange way, Joe. It's like people took her seriously, which is an interesting observation, I've realized.
It's the energy with which you carry yourself, right?
It's like this I am worth the best. End of story. There was no question about it. I am worth the best. And how many of us can actually look in the mirror and say that to ourselves, and a part of you is going, but I'm not, I don't deserve this. I'd love to hear this, who can seriously look in the mirror and go, I deserve the best, and feel it. Because we all know this goes back to feeling. You can say these things until the cows come home. If your body is not feeling it, it ain't gonna.
And the bravest step on that then is to make another list of what conversations have not been had because the two aren't aligning. This is where we say, I mean, this podcast, I mean, it's so beautiful for you and I to spend time together like this, and it stemmed from us chatting for hours and going, people have to hear what we say, but this is really what we're here for. This is really what we're here for. Is I know that every single person, like on such a really, really deep level, knows that they are worthy of all these things. You are worthy of happiness. You are worthy of success. You are worthy of joy. You are worthy of fulfillment. And it must be sad, and it must be really frustrating on a level for whoever it is to know that the thing that is holding you back is the fear of speaking your truth.
Yeah.
Right.
It really does go back to that. I think, and speaking your truth, maybe just to yourself. It doesn't always have to be like, now I need to sit down with someone and have a hard conversation. The first step may be like just sitting down with yourself going, I'm not happy. I don't like where I am. I'm bored. Whatever it is, you have to admit it to yourself first. Then you have to start looking, okay, well, then what needs to change? And I do believe that's where your work is so important, because then the person has to understand themselves and know, like, if you're going to follow a course of action, if you're a caregiver, can you go out and be a pioneer? Or are you going to be picking up orphans, waifs, and strays on the way. So I think it goes back to, yes, you admit to yourself what's not working or how you're feeling, but then you've really got to understand how you are showing up. And, there's that lovely saying that, we all go to school and we learn lessons and we write tests. Life is completely the opposite. You write the tests and you learn the lessons. And if you don't learn them, the tests, they just keep coming, whether it's the people you attract, the situations, the same things you keep falling over time and time and time again. So, it is to admit how you're really feeling and then understanding how you are showing up and the strengths. And then it goes back to the strengths and the self-worth. And then going, okay, what is my first step going to be? And I think that's the other important thing, is not to have this entire massive plan that is just overwhelming. It may be like, you starting and going, I'm going to walk today. You have no intention of doing a marathon, but I'm going to walk a kilometer, and I might walk a kilometer for the next 6 months. And then one day I'll go, oh, today I feel like I could do 2Ks. But it goes, and again, it goes back to those little changes. And I think that's also where people trip themselves up. I need to improve my eating. So we throw away all the food in our pantry and our fridge and we go, I'm going vegan. And then you buy all these things and you don't know what to do with them. Instead of going like, I'm going to start by cutting out dairy, or not even all dairy, butter and cheese or whatever it is. But it's like, do it slowly.
Yeah. I want to tell you how I train, and this is, I think, how we'll end it. So this is how I train. I train until I feel like I've done enough. And I never used to be like that. I used to be, you have to walk for an hour, or you have to do half an hour of weights, or you have to do 3 sets of 15 reps. And I follow such a down-to-earth guy on social media. I don't really spread him around because he swears like a sailor, but he's been so good for me, because one of the things that he said that shifted me forever was, he was like, yesterday you were sitting on the couch and doing nothing. And today you're trying to do an hour because someone told you that an hour, nothing less than an hour is good enough. Actually, if you just did 5 minutes, it would be better than what you were doing yesterday. And that's how I train now. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, oh, and I'll pick up the weights 7 times and I'll go, okay, I can't do more than 7 reps on that. I'm done for today. And we've spent time living together as a nomad. When I've been at Jodene, you've seen. I mean, sometimes the enthusiasm goes, and sometimes I'm out for an hour, and other times I'm out for half an hour. And it's a beautiful gift to ourselves to allow ourselves to be who we authentically are. We keep on coming back to the same point. That's it.
On that note,
what an amazing Unstuck Club.
Brilliant.
Good. We're sending everyone lots of love.
Yeah, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time.
In 2 weeks' time. Bye.
Bye.